Thank you, everybody, for showing up today. I really appreciate you taking the time and sitting in this workshop with me. My name is Jerry Gamblin. Let's see. So about me, I'm a principal engineer at Cisco, the Threat Detection and Response Group. If you have any questions, please email me at gamblin@cisco.com, not that G in there. I think I auto-corrected there. That is great. I did go over these slides last night. My website is jerrygamblin.com, and I run CVE.ICU, which you might have seen in the past. It just produces vulnerability data reports every day so that you can look at those inside your company and just get an idea of what's happening in the CVE world. So the rough agenda is they gave me a 2-hour slot when I asked for an hour slot. So I do not have. Was that a duck? Awesome. So I have about a 15-minute slide presentation and then about 45 minutes of stuff we can work through in Jupyter Notebooks on my binder. So if you want to look at the agenda right now and pick something else out for like the 11 or for like the 12:30 slot or 1:30 slot, you'll be done with that super fast. Yeah, I wanted to teach this as a workshop, and we went back and forth to like, are we going to stream this? I'm like, I want to show people code and help them run the code. So I have no idea how this is going to go in reality. So you guys are learning with me. So why this talk? I want to make CVE data analysis more open and available to the public. I talk to people all the time, and they don't understand the CVE data or even look at the CVE data very much. And there aren't great open source projects out there that are taking that data and making it publicly available. So I want to give you guys the tools to do that. Sadly, not sadly, depending on your VC state, there are a bunch of people who are taking this public data, enriching it, and then selling it, which, you know, I'm agnostic about. It's whatever you want to do. But that's one reason to look at this data, because it's all free and it takes very little time and effort to actually get to this data. Vulnerability visualizations work and work really well. I post something like this on LinkedIn every month, and it always gets a million likes, right? It's just a simple graph that says how many new CVEs there are this month versus last year. People love it. It kind of gives this there. I want to be able to give this to everybody who wants to build these kind of graphs themselves. It's super easy. The third reason is because nobody looks at the data. Second, haha. So I read a personal blog. I write a personal blog. Yes. So I read a personal blog on the 1st of every January. It's kind of just something I do. I just sit down and like go through and crush all the numbers. I wrote my blog this year. My boss emailed me and said, why is there an individual's contributor's name on there for Cisco's email address? That should be PCERT. And I'm like, I just pull the data, right? Like, I'm not adding individuals' email addresses. And they're like, where'd you get this data? I'm like, the NVD. Like, oh, this has to be a mistake. We went back and looked, and it was like that for 10 years. And nobody at Cisco knew that because they were submitting the right data to CVE. They didn't understand that the NVD then takes the data and maps it to a totally private database of email addresses and then puts that in the CVE record. So interesting. So if you're, you know, it was a fire drill on my part because somebody thought I was messing around and putting an individual's email address in there, just something that we didn't notice, right? So another thing is, if you're a CNA, if you're interested, seeing how the data flows through the system, especially the place at the end where people look at the data, is a good way to figure out who is looking at it and what it looks like on the end point. The second reason is I love the CVE program. Nobody uses their data. I will say that kind of flatly and sadly. I look at GitHub all the time. Nobody is cloning in the CVE v5 list and using that raw data for visualizations or for data. Everybody is still using the NVD program. You will get some people who say they use CVE list, and those are normally large companies who have very sophisticated ETL programs that bring that in and normalize it. But if you as an individual want to look at the data, is it easier to grab one NVD JSON-L file or 25,000 individual JSON files and put those all together, right? Like, it's a choice that was made, but part of my choice here is to get people looking at the CVE.org data and understanding while it's out there and it's hard to use, it is doable, and I provide some code on how to use that. So the workshop goal is I'm going to give you guys a bunch of Jupyter Notebooks. They're all set up. They're in a repo. I want you guys to look at them afterwards. The repo allows you to clone in the data, look at the data, and explore it. We're going to spend some time and just walk through a couple of base notebooks that I created. And then from that point, we're going to go ahead and just have some free time to try to build. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to help. So the data sources are pretty simple. We're going to use the NVD 2.0 API. For ease of use, I run a website called nvd.handsonhacking.org. It hosts one file, and that's an nvd.jsonl file that has every CVE record in it, and it's updated every 4 hours or something. I just needed a place to do this without running it all the time. I put the code that actually runs on that scraper machine in this repo that I'm going to show you, and you can grab that and run your own copy, because while we're using it in this workshop, there's no guarantee that stays up forever. There's no SLA provided with that, right? That's a personal resource that I run for my own convenience. And, you know, if Amazon wants to take it down, or if my credit card expires and I forget to update it, it might go away. So please don't build your work-related processes off of my personal projects. The second thing we're going to look at is the CVE list, the version 5. We're just going to pull down the 2025 CVEs for ease of use to keep it small. The problem with that is the CVE program decided to list them by identifiers, and not all CVEs published in 2025 are in the CVE 2025 list. When I ran this last night, there are about 8,000, well, about 12,000 to 13,000 CVEs have been published this year. That is one of the issues with the CVE list repo. There's no easy way to say, hey, I want all the CVEs published this year. I talked to them about it. They don't seem it's a big deal. They just want you to git clone the whole repo and to look at the data thing. So it's a little iffy, but we don't have time to do that. And the system we're going to use is kind of limited on space. So we won't be doing that. Technology used, we're going to use Jupyter Notebooks, Pandas, Matplotlib, and MyBinder. Has anybody used these technologies before? Right. Yeah. So MyBinder is hosted by OHV and a couple of other open source communities, and it allows you to run GitHub repos in Jupyter Notebooks, Jupyter Notebook GitHub repos for free in the cloud. No logon, no auth. I was thinking about using Google Colab for this, but they don't have a way to do no auth and to clone in repos this easily. So we're going to use MyBinder for this. It's way easier. So here are the links. We can either type those in. I dropped the link to the repo in the Discord channel. If you're in the Discord channel, other than that, let's just go to the top one, and there's a link on the bottom for that once we get started. So notes, please ask questions. This is the interactive part. This is the part where I thought that I was going to be teaching a class and not giving a lecture. So that's kind of what I prepared for. This is a hybrid course. If you have any technical questions, if you would put the technical questions in Discord, if you're on there, it'd be much easier for me to understand the question and we can kind of do it from there. I'll pull Discord up here. Like I said, I have about 8 notebooks to show you guys, and then I'm happy to stick around and help people build individual notebooks and answer the, hey, how would you visualize this question? It's really great. If you're not familiar with the data, I will tell you that the AI code bots are great at Jupyter and Pandas. If you have one of those on your machine, you can use it. There are instructions in the repo on how to clone the repo to your local machine if you want to run it locally or run it on a cloud instance that you have. You're more than welcome to do that, especially if you want to save the changes. So the last note is there's possible demo issues on the North Carolina State Wi-Fi. So I put this demo together. I tried it at Starbucks. I tried it at my house. It worked last night on the slow motel network. I get it here. I run a few of the notebooks and I get this server connection error. And then you just lose all your work because it's stateless. So what I will say is we'll try. If not, I know all of these notebooks work. And if you go home and you want to run them, that's fine. And then you can just email me questions if you have them. Okay, before we jump into the demo, does anybody have any questions about the data or overall process before we get started? Check Discord. All right, nice. So here's the repo. It has all the notebooks in here broken down. I also put the latest presentation in the presentation file folder. So if you want to grab it and look at the slides, it's there. So once again, the URL, if you're having trouble, it's github.com/jgamblin/PhonCon workshop. Oh, no problem at all. All right, that sounds better. If you just want to go down, if you're going to do the binder part, and that's what I'm going to work on, you can click the launch binder here. And it will launch you into a new window here. It's going to build a Docker container that's going to run Jupyter Lab for us. It's going to pull in all of the requirements out of the requirements.txt and build this. It's super simple and it's super slick. This is one of my favorite open source projects. So if you're interested in donating to them, it's a great use outside of any technology hiccups we have with the Wi-Fi. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the data folder. And then there are 2 files in here. There's an NVD API.py. We won't use that, but this is here if you want to download your own copy of all the CVE records in JSON-L format and put it in one file. It's how I do. This is the code I'm running. It's pretty simple. You just go and put your API key in there and then set it to run on a cron job and it works. So it's not pretty, but it does work. So here's the data notebook that we're going to run. So what this notebook is going to do, pretty simple, is going to download. Oh, sorry, click something. So what this will do, it'll download that NVD JSON-L file to a local folder here. It'll download the CVE files from the GitHub repo. There's a limited amount of space, I think like 3 gigs you can save on these. So we're just pulling 2025. If you're running this at home or you want to use another year's data later here, all you do is you change the sparse folder from 2025 to 2024 or to 2020, or you just get rid of it all together, the 2025, and it'll download all the CVEs in the repo. And then we're also going to download the schema file so we can look at that. They're pretty separate locations. So there are 3 cells that do that. If you want to click this little double arrow button up here at the top, that'll run all of the cells for you. There we go. So it will take some time. Like I said, like this NVD file is 1.3 gigs, so it'll take some time to download that. And then we'll go to the GitHub repo and download the 2025 data. And this is the part where it's more like a class. I don't have anything to say while this downloads. So if you have any questions or just.
So it's writing the file to NVD file path.
Yeah, the NVD file path is just this folder in/data called NVD. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. Thanks.
And then it'll grab the GitHub repo and pull that down in a shallow clone. Yep.
My specialty is filling awkward silences, so you keep an eye out in case anyone else wants to jump in. This is cool. What limitations are there? Obviously you said there was 3 gig of disk in this thing. What's the bandwidth limitations?
I haven't found one. That's the reason I use it, right?
Mhm.
Like it's fairly fast. Like I downloaded 1.5 gig in 45 seconds, which is great for free service and great for teaching.
Yeah.
I've not tried to stress it out or whatever,
Sure.
but I'm super happy with it.
Yeah. I'm just I've got so many questions, right? Like we're all doing this right now, so obviously we're all cloning this down. So
Yep.
It's gonna have a little spike in its bandwidth graph.
Yep.
Can it do cells in parallel? Could it be downloading the schema files whilst it's downloading the?
It probably could, but I try to keep this simple and it's just one after the other.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Right. So after those all run, it should take 3 or 4 minutes. You have all your data in that data folder. We'll start looking at the CVE program first. So if you click on the CVE program folder, let's look at the schema, the CVE_schema file. If you just run that folder, run that notebook, it should be very fast if it works. It's going to create you a new folder in here with the files that will show you what the CVE schema looks like broken down. So later on, when you want to come in and build out and say, hey, I'm missing a piece of data, or what's that limited under, you can find it here. We can also go back, and this is what I like to use to kind of torment the schema people, because these aren't complete. Only 62% of the keys have descriptions in the CVE2 schema, and only 50% have type, right? So while they have a schema, it's not complete and it could use some work. 7% have patterns. That's also interesting. If you go to my talk tomorrow about the imperative for CVE data quality, we'll talk about that. The pattern is the only data quality match that they do at this point in the CVE program. Pre-publishing, post-publishing, people can look at it and complain, but they don't have a very advanced QA process now to look at that. That is something that I am trying to get on a bandwagon of saying, hey, we need to do something. I don't like to use the ML and AI word, but like just any kind of automated testing, because if you go and look at these, you look at the schema, I think the minimum for the description is 1 character. So you can legally publish a CVE with a description of 1 character and a CVE ID, right? And it would publish and go through and end up on CVE.org. Hopefully then somebody in the community would say, hey, this is terrible, please fix it. But sometimes things just pass through. Yes.
Yeah, I get. I'm on your bandwagon.
Yeah.
What have your thoughts been about just sending a boatload of PRs to fix some of those very simply fixable schema validation things? Because I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer. This should just be better.
Yeah. I know how they're doing it. I sit on the quality working group. They're having discussions about how to fix the schema, and they're having issues. We can dig into it here. We'll have time. Right now, the CVE program does not own any of the major tooling that is used by CNAs to publish CVEs. It's all open source, and open source means that people work on it when they can. Last year, the CVE program got hung up because the Vulnogram guy was unavailable with a work thing or whatever to update the schema in Vulnogram. So they had to push a whole release from there. I think updating the schema is something that we should be able to do. I also think the CVE program should take ownership or some form of responsibility for the major CVE publishing tools. That's, I think that's also one of those things that will get some pushback, but is one of the long-term goals if you want to make CVE a great standard moving forward, is that the CVE program needs to have control over the tools that most people publish with, even in a way where they can say, hey, we're not going to stop until X open source projects updated. We've updated the CLI tool we have, the SDK we have, and the GUI we have. Everybody else can catch up at that point. So the next thing we'll look at is this CVE _ data frame. So this is a data frame that's going to build your first data with all the CVE data in there. So I pull the data that I like to look at out of here. Like I said, there are 237 keys in the schema. That's why we did the schema first. You're more than happy to add any of those schemas in here, but I basically just end up pooling these 15 things for most use cases, right? CVE ID, what state it's in, the data was observed, the data was published, and the data was updated, right? And some CVSS information, the CWE, the CNA short name, and what products are affected. So this is pretty simple. It's pretty lightweight. It might work for some of your projects, but if you want to dig in deeper, you may have to go and edit this. But this is a good baseline for most people to start with. So this just creates a data frame, and a data frame, think of it as an in-memory database, Excel spreadsheet, right? You can just pick which of these columns you want and then do data analysis on those columns. It's super easy and super useful. If you dip your toes into data science, a lot of times you'll end up in a Jupyter notebook with pandas because it allows you to see the data visually, and it allows you to do things like chunk up your code here so that you don't have to run 500 lines of code, because if something breaks, it'll break in the cell and you can just fix that and continue on. The next thing we're going to look at is the CVE data quality. Remember how to use a Windows machine? So this is going to simply rebuild that data frame that we built in that first picture and break it down and tell you what is in all of those cells. So I like to look at this just to see how complete the data is that I'm working with. As you can see, somehow there are 59 CVEs with null date published in the CVE program data, right? Like that would be something that you should go look at and figure out why. But this is just taking the data and figuring out what's in the record and then parsing it. There's probably answers to these because they do some weird stuff with rejected records that end up in the CVE.org files. I'm not a huge fan of the way it works, but I understand that's why they do it. But I always like to use this just to see how complete the data is that I'm working with. So we have 7,719 CVEs that are in this data lake right now that we're using. That's all the CVEs published as of 5 minutes ago that are CVE-2025. So we have a pretty full database there. We're going to go back up to the root cause here and go into the NVD program. We'll spend a little bit of time here because this is where I spend most of my time processing the data. So just for quality and speed of time, we're just going to go right to the NVD data frame. The NVD schema and the NVD data quality are exact copies of the CVE program. They just run and then you get full data on what the quality is there if you're interested in there, but there's no need of showing that twice. It's just run this. Is everybody else able to keep up online that are trying or having any issues? I womped myself. Let's try again. Yeah. If you definitely move the data loading to another notebook if you can, or download it at home is the right answer there. Trying to just build it here is causing some issues, as you can see.
It doesn't do. Oh. And if you want to do the thing where you just open a notebook and run all cells, you don't want the cells that pull the data again that you already have.
Yes,
To
exactly.
be there. So you want to offload to a different notebook and then cross load into your active working one.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, you're right. This is just base level stuff. I'm just trying. There are definitely ways to do this. I'm gonna have to reload and try again. So, welcome to the life of live demos.
So in this silence, why don't you tell us more about the history, like how long you've been doing this?
Yep, no problem. So, I worked for the government for 10 years in the early part of my career doing government stuff. I then ran the security program for Carfax in the US. They were the world's largest data company at the time. They had something like 1,500 records for every car in the United States, like when you got your oil changed, the last time you got rotation, et cetera. So I worked in big data, running their vulnerability management program. Vulnerability management program 10 years ago wasn't very good. It's not much better now, to be honest. But I went and worked for a startup called Cisco Security. 5 years ago, we were acquired by Cisco. I've been at Cisco for these 5 years in their threat detection and response CTO group, helping guide vulnerability data into all of the Cisco products. So we're trying really hard to be on both sides here. We try really hard to push from the user side, where I go to all the meetings and talk about the users and how people use the data and why that data needs to go better. And then we have other people here who come from the other side of Cisco, Omar and company, who are CNA based, and they're worried about how do you publish it. Over the last couple of years, it's been really good because it seems like those two sides are finally coming together to think, hey, we got to do more than just throw this in the wind. We have to be able to make sure that the data we're putting out there is actually useful for the people in the end. A personal opinion, for the longest time, the CVE program just kind of outsourced all of that work to NVD. Everybody would just go look at the NVD for the data because they were doing all the enrichment. With the government issues lately, that's not exactly a reliable path for people to do. So we're really starting in the last 12 months to put more and more data into the actual CVE records, which is really good. And there are also other people who are companies that are trying to backfill that data. I don't work for Old Volncheck. I don't have any stock or any equity in that company, but they're doing a good job with their NVD++. The GitHub people have their database. Google has osv.dev, which is good. And there are a bunch of other open source databases. The problem here, and a question I'll address tomorrow, is who is the source of truth for CVE data? It always has to be someone, because we're going to have desperate information in different databases. For the longest time, I could point to the nvd.org and say, hey, this is what the CVSS is for this. We can have the discussion starting at this point, but I can't just take it off of anybody else's website, right? And we've kind of lost that who is the source of truth for CVE data recently. And to be honest, the ADPs that we've kind of launched has kind of muddied that water a little bit more, because you'll have an ADP CVSS score and then the CVSS score that was published with the record. So it can get really, really messy really quick. And like I tell people, I don't necessarily need the 100% right answer, because you can always argue about CVSS vectors, CPEs, etc. I just need a starting point where when I'm talking to somebody from another company, we can say, here's the data we're starting from. Like, it's not a bring your own data fight to talk about vulnerabilities. Yeah.
So while this loads, I got a question about those CVEs that you mentioned that only had like a character description. What do you think should we do about those things? Because like we don't have much to start off. Like say if the description of the CVE is an A.
Yeah.
What should we do on these? Do you feel that we should reject them, or should we push back and say you either behave and put out good data, or there can be consequences here?
I don't know. And to be completely honest, the one character one is kind of an outlier. Let's talk about a real situation. Microsoft releases 4-word CVEs all the time. You know, buffer overrun in Windows kernel, right? Is that good enough for most people? It doesn't say what Windows, it doesn't say anything, right? Like 3 and 4-word CVE descriptions are not uncommon. So
I wonder why they simply just don't pump that into their own choice of LLM and just say, oh, give me a good thing about this.
I don't know. I don't know if a lot of people think that the more data you put in the CVE, the more likely it is to be exploited. I don't know if that's true or not, right? So we're back to security by obscurity. If it doesn't say that it has to be a verbose description, a lot of people are not going to do that. And I once again ran into this. I'm happy to come help you at your desk, but just reloading this notebook up here isn't going to be fun for anybody. I'm super sorry about that. I did try. This notebook is available on GitHub, and I will update it, and I will stick around and answer any questions. I'm sorry about that. I'll show you what we were going to build. So here's what I build on CVE.ICU every day. It's these graphs with these calendars, and it just shows you how many CVEs are published every day, what the CVE per month are, who's the CNA assigner. This is really interesting. For the first time in the history of MITRE, patchstack.com is out publishing MITRE as a CNA. So we finally have someone who is publishing more CVEs than the root. I think that last time I looked, kernel.org was right behind it. They had a big dump lately. So for the first time this year, I'm pretty confident that MITRE will move into the parts that they've always wanted to be, just the program manager and not the CNA of first.
I really like your graphs because I use them all the time, but
Yep.
I think it's also telling if you look PatchStack and the third one, which is WordFence, I believe,
Yep.
They're all coming from more or less the same thing. It's WordPress plugins and a metric ton of CVEs that they're coming with.
Yeah, and personal opinion, I'm okay with that, right? Like as long as the records are full, I am not upset about it. Like we work with a relatively small data set. When you talk to other people who work with security data sets, 250,000 records is small. I mean, or at Cisco, we have firewalls that produce that many syslogs in a minute. So like I'm okay with that data being in there if it's valid. And I think the community does a very good job of calling out people when they are stuffing CVEs, are producing CVEs that are not of quality. But there has to be a better intake policy for that.
Yeah. I kind of commend PatchStack on their strategies to basically, they saw a gap in the market and they positioned themselves like, oh yeah, WordPress plugins, like there's thousands getting spun up every week. So, but they're quite vulnerable. per nature because you just can crank out one. So
Yep.
it's really nice that they just got that market niche and
Well,
just fully own
And
it.
they know, right? Like if it doesn't have a CVE, it's not going to get prioritized by vulnerability management team. So even though it is just a cross-site scripting and a WordPress plugin, if they give it a CVE, it'll land on somebody's roadmap versus not having a CVE. So they're using the CVE program correctly. I have no qualms with the way that they're doing the data. I don't think that them or kernel.org are trying to abuse the CVE system in any way. I just think it's the lack of guardrails that sometimes produce less than ideal CVE descriptions.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any other questions or that I can help with? Once again, I'm sorry this demo died, but please take it back and use it on your Wi-Fi wherever. And then if you have any questions, please just ping me on anything, and I'm glad to answer.
No, this is super cool. Despite the fact that the demo gods did not smile upon me. Could you have shipped I guess because there's no state stored, so you can't have shipped here's a pre-cloned anything.
No, I was thinking about maybe spinning up a Jupyter Lab server, but then I didn't. Yeah, you can't do that. You can run Jupyter books. I will say that once you figure out what you want in your notebook, especially if you're at a CNA and you just want to say, hey, what do our CVEs look like? It's super simple to run this and then use the GitHub actions to create a CSV or a website. That's what CVE.ICU is built on. It's just Jupyter book, and it runs every 4 hours and updates that site. So we had a question in the back.
Hi, Jerry. Very nice to see you again. I see for the first time that there is affected products in the prediction of this model. Are you using the combination of the CVE to display the data, or they are just numbers, like the CVE affects this number of data, or you are also rotating per type of product, like this product is generating this kind of CVE?
Sorry, on the CPE page.
Yeah, I see that you're importing in the CVE schema that you were presenting before. There is the affectation, basically. What are the products that are affected, each CVE affects? Are you using this information in displaying the data, or is just a number?
Just displaying the data at this point. I use that data internally, and I think there are a bunch of good talks going on. And I really think that like the source of truth, we really have to kind of browbeat people into using something. CPEs have their weaknesses. Perl has their weaknesses, right? But what we can't have are three different formats, right? And say, just pick the one you want and use it, because it leaves half the people out who built CPE tools or Perl tools or whatever. Like there's a way that you can just put in when you submit a record, you submit a Perl, and then there's a best option of a tool that then converts it to CPE or whatever. I can't remember what the third version somebody has recently suggested we use is, but yeah. It wasn't Squid. It was another Omnivore. Yeah. So yeah, I've never used Omnivore. I'm sure for a very group of people that it's super important, but yeah. So there just has to be some way to convert that data back and forth for everybody to use it.
Talking a lot, but I guess this also goes to show that we didn't learn anything from beta versus VHS or HD DVD versus Blu-ray, because we keep doing the thing where we have competing formats and we don't coalesce into one or create tooling to transfer one to the other. We also see this in the SBOM space with SPDX and others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because, and to be completely honest, I think CPE is an abandoned format. Nobody knows who owns it or who I don't even think the CPE board meets to discuss changes to the schema anymore. And then you end up with stuff like this, right? Like, oh, this is always funny. These are the CVEs with the highest CPE counts, unique CPE counts. There's one CPE that has 4,800 affected products on it, right? And we're on this list too. Cisco, I think, is third or fourth here. We have one with 2,400. It's probably used right, but is that useful to most people? When you go look at the NVD page for that, it's like scrolls after scrolls, right? Like, we really need to get serious about data quality and to lean into it. And I'm not even here to say that AI is the way to do that, or machine learning. I would be happy if we just did some simple regex or anything, right? Like, I know that the cool thing to say is AI can solve this problem. I don't know if it can, but I know that we can do a better job than what we're doing now when we allow CVEs to be published with minimal data. Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Once again, I apologize that the demo didn't work as planned, but I am super happy to spend time for the next however long and answer any questions you have or to help you work with stuff. So thank you guys again, and have a good day and the rest of the conference.